This is Thriveonomics, presented by Thrive Mortgage. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Thriveonomics. We're very happy to have you with us today. Before we get into our topic, just want to give a quick word to our title sponsor. Title sponsor for Thriveonomics is Thrive Mortgage. And as you heard about in the intro, we excel in providing our clients with a legendary lending experience. So we'd love to introduce you to any of our experienced loan officers all across the country. Just reach out to us at Thriveonomics at thrivemortgage.com. We'll be happy to make that introduction happen and get you all squared away. Well, in today's episode, I've got a very special guest on. It's a gentleman that I've known for some time, and he's a very active and very influential force. He and his wife are both very active, very influential forces in education. And what they have done is they have set up an academy called Acton Academy. And it's something that's near and dear to my heart because education is something that I'm very passionate about. Come from multiple generations of teachers. I myself was, as our regular listeners know, I myself was a high school teacher as well, and got to spend some time with Jeff and Laura Sandefer and learning more about their model. And it has just absolutely exploded from the 8 or 9 years ago when they first founded it. So welcome to Thriveonomics, Jeff. It's a pleasure to visit with you again.
Thanks, James. Great to be here.
All right. Well, we're going to jump into just diving in, talking right away about about Acton Academy. What were some of the motivations that led you and Laura to start it? But let's start off with just kind of covering what is the mission or what is the vision of Acton Academy?
Well, our mission is simple. We believe each person who enters our doors is a genius who deserves to find a calling that will change the world. And that means whether you're going to go out in the mortgage business and do it, whether you're going to be an entrepreneur, it also means not only our learners and the young heroes, it also means parents and guides that work with us. So we just believe everyone has a place in the world where they can change the world, and our job is to help them find it.
That's beautiful, and that's really something that I think is not necessarily missing, but it's definitely a component that really makes a difference in the life of a child as they grow up. Because there's certain ways of educating kids where you just have that kind of rote memory regurgitation. That's one model, but I think inspiring kids to dream bigger is something that's really missing, and you provide that to your students, which I think is really cool. One of the things that I know that Acton is big on is the whole concept of the hero's journey. Can you explain a little bit about what your definition of that means? Where did that start from?
Sure. And, it comes from, of course, the mythical Joseph Campbell work on the hero's journey, but really you can see it in any popular movie. I mean, it's in Star Wars, it's in The Lion King. I mean, almost any tale we tell about humanity is the tale of hearing the call. There's some special thing out there for you to do, usually refusing the call because I don't want to go. I'm in my comfortable, ordinary life, crossing the threshold, and then, meeting monsters along the way. So I'm in search of the Holy Grail, but I'm going to have to meet the Black Knight somewhere along the way. So it's the story of human overcoming. And then finding at the very end, of course, that when you reach the Grail, if you do in fact reach it, it wasn't all about the Grail. It was about you and how you changed in the process. So that's really the whole underlying concept of Acton. Heroes don't always win, but when they get knocked down, they always get back up. And so believing every person is a genius, and that doesn't mean 180 IQ, right? I mean, it means, right. I'd like to be 6 feet tall and have hair. I don't have that, but I can work hard. And so, genius means having a special gift or talent. If you look it up in the dictionary, it doesn't mean 180 IQ. So you go out there with that gift or talent, you battle something in the world, you find your place, you find your community, and you do something that changes the world. And you get very good at something, not just so you can make more money, that's nice too, but you get good at something because it brings better opportunities to you, and it surrounds you with people that are more interesting to work with. So that's really the concept of Acton, the hero's journey, the idea of overcoming, and that grit and hard work will solve many problems.
That's a really good point, and it's something that it kind of brings to mind something that I've had a regular conversation with my sons. Is not I don't ask them necessarily what do they want to do when they grow up or when they become adult. there's any number of answers to that question, but none of them really lead to the ultimate question, which is the more important one of what are you passionate about? And so I have regular conversations with my two boys who are 14 and 13 now, and I ask them more questions related to what do you want to be, or what do you enjoy, what are you passionate about, what's attracting you. One of them wants to be a vet, and the other one wants to be an Air Force pilot, and then go on to be a commercial pilot. So, which I know you are you have your pilot's license as well, didn't you?
Yeah. No, in fact, I fly a lot. In fact, at this very moment, our oldest son, Charlie, is in an airplane small little airplane, taking two of his friends to College Station. So he just got his pilot's license
No kidding.
a few months ago. So yeah, no, we love to fly. And, whether you're a pilot, whether you're selling mortgages, there's a place for you, to practice that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned passion. The root word of passion doesn't mean have fun all the time. It means to suffer. Like, what are you willing to do that's hard? Because through that hard work, you can have a lot of fun. And so, but it requires that work ethic.
Yeah. What was it? Was there some kind of singular event that motivated you and Laura to start Acton, or was it more of a series of revelations along the way?
No, there was absolutely a singular event. And everything we've done at Acton has been a positive accident. It's been something we've stumbled into and experimented and found something new. So we started Acton. We started with a blank sheet of paper, but the emphasis behind it. Our daughter, who was older, was in one of the very best private schools in Austin, and our two boys were in Montessori school, where, as you know, there's a great deal of experimentation and freedom. And I went to see the very best teacher. Like you were at your high school, I went to see the very best teacher in her school. And I said, when should we transition the boys from Montessori to traditional school? And he said, well, as soon as possible. And I asked why. And he said, well, because once they've had that kind of freedom, they won't like being chained to a desk and lectured to for 8 hours a day. And before I could stop myself, I said, well, I don't blame them. And this, teacher, who was a very tall African-American man, wonderful guy, he looked down at the ground for the longest time. And he shook his head. I thought I'd offended him. And then he said very quietly, I don't blame them either. And I went home that day and I told Laura, the very best teacher at one of the very best schools just told me not to put our boys there. So we're either going to start a school or we're going to homeschool.
Right.
But I'm not sending them there. And so that was kind of the moment that we knew we were going to do something different.
That's fascinating to me, because I had when I was a high school teacher, I battled through a lot of that same stuff where I would take a look at the curriculum that I would be required to teach my students, and I would shake my head thinking, this is going to inspire nobody. I mean, for in all truthfulness, the very first time as an English teacher, the very first lesson or day that I taught my students how to diagram a sentence was also the last day that I taught my students how to diagram a sentence, because I mapped out this sentence, had it perfectly done. It wasn't a very complex sentence. It was pretty simple, just teaching them how to do it. And I turned around and looked at their faces, and every single one of them was looking back at me with just pure, unadulterated hatred. Like, I really hate you right now. And I couldn't blame them. I was bored. And so I erased it and told them to crumple up their notes, and they had one free shot, and they all threw the sheets of paper at me. And I told them from that day forward, I would never teach them something if I did not have a legitimate explanation as to how it was going to be applicable to them in the real world, in their adult life. And that really transformed, that not only transformed that class, it transformed my relationship with students, and it transformed the way that I interacted with them. And sometimes it works. Sometimes you just had students that you just couldn't break through to. But despite all that, having that revelation of the worst thing or the worst way in the world to teach a child is to stand up and talk at them for 50 to 55 minutes and uninterrupted. So I think that a lot of teachers are starting to gravitate to that and starting to understand that. So with that in mind, let's talk about kind of the model of Acton Academy. You don't have teachers, you have guides.
Right. And as a guide, which I do from time to time, my goal is to be a game maker. My goal is to invite them to play a game, make it very clear why this game is important on the hero's journey, to provide an example. If we're going to write a short story for some reason, I will show O. Henry or Poe, or Hemingway. And then with an example to show a recipe. I mean, what are the steps to do this?
Right.
And then finally, some sort of game rules and rewards for the game. So if you think about it, that's kind of a second why. I start with the why, like you're talking about, we end with the why, and then we just get out of the way. And in fact, we're down to where at our Acton campus, we have 100 young people and only 2 adults. And that includes admissions, janitorial. The young people do everything. So my goal as a game maker is really to equip them to become game makers so they can actually run the studio. If they can build their own culture in their own place, then I'm no longer needed. And of course, that's what we all want for our sons and daughters at the end, is for them to be human beings who are willing to go out and independently pursue a hero's journey. So my job is, like you said, to get out of the way, but you need some structure for that. It's not Lord of the Flies. It's not do anything you want. And the structure is providing an example and a why and a recipe, and then making it feel like a game, a hard game. Writing a short story is not easy, but if I know why I'm doing it, it's fun, and make it a game and then get out of the way.
So with that in mind, because the adult to child ratio is so lopsided, I got to experience your model firsthand. I got to see the interaction that the guides would have with the students, and I would see just the joy on the students' faces as they were left with just very little instruction. As you said, they had guardrails and kind of a framework to work within, and so they weren't going berserk. But I would see them take this instruction and they just knew instinctively what to do, even in group settings, even in teams.
Yeah,
and then I would look
and even as young as 7 years old. I mean, age isn't really independent. No, I think the thing I've discovered from all this, one of the things is young people are capable of far more than we've ever imagined.
Sure.
And so they tend to dumb it down around adults because we have the authority and the power. We're bigger than they are. And so, they tend to not play up to their game. But if you kind of take the shackles off, make sure with freedom there's lots of responsibility, but trust them. It's amazing what they do. Now, it's not utopia, right?
Correct.
It falls apart. It goes to Lord of the Flies. There's tyranny involved. I mean, it's very messy, just like real life.
So I was about to say, so is life.
So is life. So all human organizations have entropy. If you don't inject energy, I mean, you've run organizations, you've got to be injecting positive energy, and they'll fall apart and you put them back together. Our studios are no different. But the beauty of that is the young people move at 2 to 3 grade levels a year, and nobody cares.
Right.
It's so unimportant because it happens, but it's not the academics that matter. It's that ability to self-regulate and to set your own goals and to work with a team and to rebuild the culture. That's the really valuable part, and it's an amazing thing to watch.
Who do you think benefits more from this model, the learners or the guides?
That's a really great question. We believe everybody there's on a hero's journey, so guides certainly benefit from it. Given that our goal is to get out of the way, and when we hire an apprentice guide, our goal is for them to start an Acton, and we've got 271 Actons around the world now. So our campus isn't the only one. We're in 25 countries.
Yeah.
So, I think the guides may benefit a great deal because they eventually become founders and owners of their own community. I would say also parents, it takes a pretty tough parent to do this because you can't be a helicopter parent where you try to micromanage everything. You can't be a lawnmower parent where you take the obstacles away so the path's easy. It's hard to be the kind of parent that I know you are, where you allow your children to make mistakes and to suffer, and to, and it's hard. But that's the way they learn. I think we have a tendency in the society that's not helpful to think, a child 6 years old, it was idyllic when I was 6, and how wonderful it was to be 8. It's hard to be a 6-year-old. It's hard to be an 8-year-old. And so it's okay that it's hard. That's getting ready for it to be hard to be a 14-year-old. In the old days, you could captain a ship at 14 and you apprenticed at 10 or 11. Sure. At Acton, we have them out in the world apprenticing at 11 or 12, working in the real world. Real world is hard.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's fabulous. Hard is good. And so
Yeah.
I just think that the parents who can let go and allow their children to actually struggle and see that failure actually hurts, but moves you forward. So I think the parents and the relationships parents get with their young heroes from this is the parents probably benefit more than anyone.
That's a really key thing to keep in mind. And when you're talking about setting up a school or any kind of education system that involves parents, kids, obviously parents are highly invested in the success of their children, or even perceived success of their children. So
Yeah.
when they are able to see that kind of development and see it take place over such a short period of time, like there have been times when I've looked at my boys or been having conversations with them where I'm just like, "Dadgum, when did you grow up?" Like 5 years
Yeah.
within the span of a week,
Yeah.
and they have when the phone's not in front of in front of their face, and you're able to actually have an engaging conversation with them. It's very revelatory as a father to be
Yeah.
able to have those conversations and think, oh, they were listening, and or just ask them, where did you pick that up, or any of that stuff. So watching that development is key.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the other powerful thing. You know, we're very big on the Socratic method,
Right.
and you know, in fact, adults are not allowed on campus to ever answer a question of any kind. And you know that can be kind of annoying. I get home at night and Laura says, you know, how was school today? I said, well, how do you think it was? You know, so you can be, the Socratic method can be tough, but it is, you know, it's more fun to be curious than to be right. And
Great.
so we're trying to get that sense in both adults and the young people that, you know, it's a searching process and it's a questioning process, and that, you know, it is fun to ask your child, what's the hardest thing you did today? What's the most fun thing you did today? You know, let's talk about a hard issue out there in the world, and there's plenty out there now. It's funny, when we went to the whole COVID thing and, you know, made the transition, one day we were in the studios and the next day we weren't. Our young people were on Zoom the next morning. I didn't even know what Zoom was, right? And they're on Zoom having squad meetings and setting back. They're planning an exhibition that they were going to do in person. That was a major event, and they pivot 2 weeks later and they're doing it virtually in a recorded way that works. We didn't do anything. And what's funny is we got calls from all over the world, because, you know, we have these schools all over the world. Like, can you please give us your platform and your challenges? We've heard how well it's working. And I would go into this long explanation with superintendent or educator. I'd say, like, look, it's not about that. It's about the community, the agency, letting them be themselves, having, you know, freedom and responsibility. And I'd get to the end of this long conversation and they'd say, well, okay, I got that. Can you give us your platform and challenges?
Yeah, they want to document.
Yeah,
they want a roadmap.
And I get that. I'm not being critical, other than that, if I could give them that and it would work, it would be magical. But our young people, they adapted to the new changes in the world much better than the adults. They missed their friends, but man, they were right at work the next day having fun and build, because they had important stuff to do. And if you got important stuff to do, you figure out Zoom.
Right.
Yeah.
If you have unimportant stuff to do, Zoom doesn't matter.
If I can chime in too.
Yeah. How about it?
Yeah. I mean, my daughter, when she got, you know, with the whole COVID thing happened, her school, Round Rock ISD over here, they probably shouldn't say them by name, but they were not prepared at all. And you're right. My daughter with her friends, everyone was on Discord and Zoom meetings, and they were doing things like normal, but the school itself was, they had no work for them. And so everything was just, hey, if you can do this, do this. And my daughter was saying, nobody's doing the work except for me and maybe one or two other people. But yeah, I just feel like, you know, kids are so smart, you know, and I think it's how we communicate with them, you know, like I don't talk down to my daughter, like treat her like a, you know, like her age. I talk to her like the way I talk to right now that we're talking.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just feel that really helps her, because her brain is so developed now. Like, we can have conversations as if she was the same conversations that I have with my brother. And because kids are so exposed to, like, right now, the COVID-19, all the stuff that's protesting and all that, they have a lot more on their minds than we had, I think, when we were kids. I don't know what the difference is.
They certainly have access to more information than we have.
look, the learners in our campuses are a lot more interesting than my friends. I mean, I love my friends, but they really are. They're very interesting, and they can think deep thoughts, and they struggle with things. They're fascinating to talk with. I mean, and to listen to. But so I think that's the lesson of Acton is children are capable of far more than we ever imagined. And I'd say one of my rules personally is I treat anyone who walks in the door at Acton. I hope I do this all over, any place, but I have to there because it's my promise. I treat them as if they were a colleague at Google. So if I'm working at Google and there's someone younger than me and I say, well, aren't you a cute little girl? I'm in HR immediately, right? You don't speak to a colleague at Google just because they're 20 years younger than you that way. You show respect. So
sure.
I speak to every young person on our campus as if they were a colleague at Google or Albert Einstein, or you treat them with that kind of respect and they rise to the challenge.
Right.
It's just amazing.
That's an interesting point. I read a very long time ago a story about Martin Luther and the guy who started the whole Protestant Reformation. Anyway, he was a teacher and would every day when he would walk into his classroom, he would always turn and bow to his students. And another colleague asked him why he did that. And he said, I do that every day because I never know who I'm going to be teaching.
Wow.
That person sitting at the desk or in the chair in front of him could grow up to be a king or a leader of some sort. And that always kind of stuck with me as very interesting.
It's not even probably like they will. Like these kids are they are the future.
Yeah.
Like it's not even like hypothetical. Like they are the future.
Yeah. So when you have that kind of a mindset, it really changes as Jeff and Laura have found out, it really changes the perception that you have of who's standing in front of you, even though they might be 4 feet lower than your eye level.
Now, I will say, because I want to keep coming back to this isn't utopia, because you form a tribe, right? And you have this tribe, but tribes have boundaries. And so the young people in our campuses set their own contracts and their own consequences. But there is a point where Jeff or James decides to step out of bounds enough times that you're asked to leave the tribe. And, that's difficult because so anyone can come. Anyone who wants to live by the rules of the group can stay. And by the way, anyone can come back. You can always reapply. But it's not utopia. I may come through a period where I'm struggling and my classmates and fellow travelers can't help me. And I have to take a time out for a while because I can't bring down the rest of the society, or I can only tax it so much before I need to go somewhere else.
Right.
And, that's just difficult.
When we were talking about, before we started recording, we were talking about how many other businesses, you're an entrepreneur at heart. And we were talking about the number of businesses that you've started. One of the immediate predecessors to Acton Academy was the Acton MBA program that you established. Now, I mean, it's highly regarded as one of the top MBA programs in the country. So were there experiences that you garnered from launching the graduate program that helped you with launching the academy?
Absolutely. And the Socratic Method being, number one about it, having been to Harvard Business School, practice with some of the best teachers there who we borrowed from to build the Acton MBA. But what's interesting is, James, while that was kind of the starting point of the Acton Academy, all the lessons we learned about games and ways to build things at the academy are now flowing back to the MBA. So now the learning is coming back the other direction. In fact, just this last year, we actually abandoned the MBA credential. We gave back the ability to award a postgraduate degree to the accreditors and said, we're going to now call this the Acton NGA, the next great adventure, and we're going to equip people for their adventures in life. We're running, as you know, it's like the Navy. I mean, we have Navy SEALs, we have Olympic athletes. This is a very high-end, almost Harvard, Stanford level program.
Right.
But we decided we couldn't stay within the constraints of traditional education anymore and deliver the adventures that our young people need. And so all the learning from Acton Academy has now come full circle back to the Acton NGA. And the young people, the lessons we learned from 7-year-olds are serving Navy SEALs and Olympic athletes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So I was one of the things that I was going to follow up on was, is there any overlap? Clearly there is.
Well, there used to be more overlap. We took about 3 years ago, we took the launch padders or high schoolers we had, and they competed in a Harvard-style case discussion with the Acton MBA students at that time. And they actually, it was refereed by a group of alumni, and the launch padders, the high schoolers, barely eked out a victory over the MBAs. But that was a big deal. So these were, really talented 20-something-year-olds who'd been practicing a lot, and they were beaten by the high schoolers. So that was so much fun. We came back the next year and did it again. Well, the next year, the high schoolers trounced the MBAs. I mean, it wasn't even close. They just destroyed and they destroyed them. And, the MBAs had done 12 cases that week, and this was their 13th, and you can have all the excuses, but they didn't have any excuses. They were so trounced, they just walked away shaking their heads. And we decided we can't let the high schoolers compete with the Acton NGA students anymore because it's too demoralizing. And that just shows the quality of a group that was kind of brought together in middle school and high school is really beating people at the Harvard, Stanford level. People ask us, like our sons, as we discussed, about to go off to Georgia Tech, and Acton Academy graduates now are getting all these scholarship offers and high-end colleges. Mm-hmm. But when people ask about college, we always say, colleges need them a lot more than they need college. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised in a few years if very few of our high school graduates go to college. I think they'll go get an apprenticeship at SpaceX. Sure. And say, hey, I need to defer Stanford for a year. And then 3 years later, they'll be so high up in SpaceX, they'll say, well, I got admitted to Stanford, but I didn't have time to go. Right. And I think that's where they're headed just because they're capable of so much.
I would agree with that. And it's gotten to the point where I have shared with my sons, like college has gotten to a point where just going for a liberal arts degree or just something that's not specific to a particular profession is not so much needed anymore. And if you are unsure about where your path is taking you, or unsure about where your passions are leading you, college isn't necessarily going to be the place where you go and find that. Not anymore.
Yeah. Well, it used to be. And I think that's where, starting in the 60s, that higher education gave up what it's really supposed to do, which is to equip you to figure out what you're going to go out and do in the world. Right. And it started doing lots of other things, including preparing scholars, and it kind of lost its way. And that's really what the Acton Academy and the Acton NGA for the older students is all about now. What is my next great adventure? Right. Why was I put here? Who am I to become? We do these interesting things at both the Academy and the NGA, where young people go out and interview someone like you that's a role model. Mm-hmm. And they'll interview 3 people between their age and about 30, and 3 between the ages of 30 and 45. And then we always try to get them to interview 3 people kind of over the age of 60, so older, older people. What's interesting is, after thousands of these interviews, when they come back and report, over and over again, you hear the same 3 questions after age 60 that you'll ask yourself: did I contribute something meaningful? Was I a good person? And who did I love, and who loved me? Mm-hmm. And to me, when you really understand at a young age, those are the questions you'll be asking later. So you should be asking them now. Mm-hmm. It begins to put you on the path for whatever that next great adventure is for 2 years from now, for the next 2 years, which puts you on the path for another 2 years. Mm-hmm. And soon you wake up and realize you have a superpower. You're good at something. Mm-hmm. You found an industry or a domain. You understand a battlefield you can play on. Mm-hmm. And you found your place, kind of your city, your culture, your people. Mm-hmm. And suddenly that's a calling. I mean, you wake up and 10 years later, you realize you have a calling that was made up of all these adventures. But to me, that's what college should be. Yes. Help me find those adventures. It doesn't do that anymore. And it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. And so, one of the beauties is, I don't think our older Navy SEAL Olympic quality students need that. And I know our Acton Academy students don't. They may go get a college degree, right? But it's because it's a tool for something that might be helpful, but they're going to get it faster, cheaper, and better than just wasting 4 years of time on campus.
Yeah. Correct. I used to work, before I got into all the digital media and all that. Mm-hmm. It's pretty funny because a lot of my jobs, I was working at Coffee Bean, and I was trying to follow my passion, doing music, and I was kind of having like throwaway jobs. And it was really funny because a lot of my bosses had degrees, and I just thought it was really funny because we always kind of made fun of them. They were a little older and they had degrees, and why were they with us and things like that, And then eventually I went out and I got into digital media, something that I really had a passion for that I kind of found on my own because I kind of went to some art schools, but they never really trained me how to like go out and get a job, go out and do something, like how important internships are. So I finally did all that on my own without college. And then all of a sudden I found myself in jobs doing what I'm doing now, like digital media, getting paid a lot of money. And everybody around me, a lot of people around me had bachelor's degrees, and I was the only one. I still don't have a bachelor's degree, and I'm probably making more money and I've had better positions than a lot of these people that even have college degrees, because I think they had the same problem that I had when I got out of my art school. When I say art school, I mean like high school. I went to like a magnet school. Was they taught me how to be a really good artist. They just didn't teach me how to make money doing that. And so I think that's the problem with a lot of the colleges now is like, yeah, you pay all this money and then they just kind of like, you don't realize like how much power you have to go talk to these jobs and or do these internships, and just kind of, there's so much competition out there. And but it is funny. I just saw the contrast, of the two.
Yeah, it's funny. It was one of the things that one of the first conversations I had with my two sons when COVID-19 hit and the economy was virtually starting the shutdown and shelter at home. I turned to both of them at the same time. I said, boys, you need to pay close attention to who is still working right now. And that was like, who is still being called upon right now. Fortunately for us in financial services, we by most states considered us to be essential, an essential industry because of how much real estate is tied to the national economy. So that was a good thing for us. But other industries, hospitality, not so lucky and not so fortunate during this time. So yeah, just going to college, it's no longer a good enough excuse to say I'm going to college because I need a degree in order to get a job. No, you don't. No, you don't. And this is, this conversation is proof of that. One of the things I definitely want to touch on is you talked about how you are now international. You're in, how many did you say, 25 countries?
25. I lose count, but 25, I think.
Well, it's understandable to lose count at that many, but you can just say a couple dozen. So what is it? Is there any kind of process that you follow in determining where new academies are planted?
So we have, it's a great question. We have over 12,000 auditions of parent entrepreneurs who want to start an Acton Academy. We get another 200 a week. Even in these times, we're getting 200 a week from people who want to start one. What we look for is, we look for parents who are going to put their own children in the Acton Academy. So we know they're going to have literally skin in the game. If your two boys were, 5 and 7 and you were going to start an Acton, I know James is going to, work very hard. We look for people that have had success at a project or selling or running a business, because we know they can launch something. And then, we hope that they have some kind of standing in the community. They have a network of friends to draw on who will listen to them. And really that's our main criteria, is we're looking for people. We're not really looking for people that have education experience. That's fine if they do, but it can even be counterproductive, because this is such a new model that it doesn't look anything like the world. And you were a different kind of teacher. You were a Socratic teacher, but it doesn't really look anything like the normal traditional education world, which frankly is fine. We don't have a beef with that. We're just different, and we're serving the families we can serve. But that's what we're looking for. People who have their own children in the school, entrepreneurial success of some kind, and kind of a deep curiosity for this kind of learning.
How difficult is that when it's an international applicant or an international interviewee?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. It's not. It sounds like it would be, but the passion comes through, and our process is really tough. So rather than a process where we're calling you back all the time saying, James, aren't you interested? Our process is more like a salmon swimming upstream. And so you have to jump over a lot of hoops, and only really the people who care a lot make it to the end. And so the process itself is designed to help identify those who won't give up, because really it's not complicated to start an Acton Academy. It's just hard. And those are different things. Hard is different than complicated.
Of course. Yeah, the reason why I focused on that is we have two subscribers over in the UK. So according to our last heat map, so
Well, no, we
apparently,
have an Acton opening in London. We have one we just approved in Switzerland.
all
Europe
right,
is actually much harder. We have far more in Latin America and Asia because of the restrictions. It's illegal in many European countries to homeschool. So non-traditional schools are hard, but we do
right,
have in a few of the European, including in the UK,
okay,
we do have schools.
gotcha. Yeah, so if you are an international Thrivenomics listener and you are interested in in talking to Jeff and learning
Yeah.
more about it, then definitely reach out to him. So are there so let's talk about some of the projects that the students engage in as we kind of start to wrap things up. Are there how is it how's what sorry, I'm stumbling over my question. What's the process, or is there a process for how you determine what the students are going to engage in
Yeah.
with the given school? Because are you still a year round, basically a year round school?
Yeah, we're basically going year round. So we go on 5 or 6 week sprints. So you can
Hmm.
think about it as you're coding software and then you have to ship the software. So
Right.
they're working very hard for between 4 and 6 or 7 weeks. Then there's a public exhibition at the end where you show something, and then you get a week off. And because of that, we go year round because we really go through middle of July and then we start back September 1st. So there's a short summer
Hmm.
break. But they're doing these sprints and then a week off and sprints and week off. And we do that for most of the year. An example of a project at the end, an exhibition, might be, you might read a biology textbook for high school biology or middle school biology if you even take it.
Hmm.
At Acton, you would do the medical quest. And in the medical quest, you are a doctor playing a role for this 6 week period. And you're learning how to read real blood tests, how to look at a CT scan, and
Hmm.
most importantly, how to listen to a patient and diagnose. So you're actually learning things about that you can use for your own health for real.
Hmm.
And you're taking a lot of the same online courses a doctor or a nurse would take. This is in middle school. At the exhibition, and this is where it all comes together,
Right.
we might have 40 adults show up and they all have a deck of cards, and those are their symptoms. And there's teams of doctors that then diagnose, and you'll pull out this card and say, well, my heart hurts or my chest hurts, it's tight.
Right. Right.
Well, then we're going to order an EKG. Well, then one of the cards has the EKG, but that just cost $1,000. And so the teams of students have to make decisions in real time of how to triage and how to help these patients. And at the end of the game, those who have the most patients that survive for the least amount of money win. But they've learned actually how to listen and diagnose and actually play the role of a medical practitioner. And through that, they learn enormous amounts of biology, but not to memorize a textbook. It's to actually help someone improve their health. So that's one of, we'll do 7 things like that a year. And that's one example of kind of a 6-week quest.
That's fascinating. It's interesting that you focused on the medical piece of that. I would be really curious to because we had a gentleman named Dr. Marty McCrory on a previous podcast who wrote a book called The Price We Pay, and it was all about what's broken with the United States health system and ways what his prescription was for fixing it. So it was really fascinating read, and it's something that our company we've kind of adopted, and our CEO has made copies available to folks at our company. But something he's definitely very passionate about. But it interests me that I would love to see an exhibition where that gets thrown into the mix, where
Yeah.
you've got these kids that are playing the roles of these doctors, and then also in light of that, also playing the roles of the administrators and the people that
Yeah.
are doing things and finding solutions to to not just cure the illness, but also cure the ailment, what's ailing the healthcare system itself, and the monstrosity that it's become, and how to
Yeah.
fix it.
Well, that's why we embed economics in everything we do. I mean, it's
Right.
not the study of economics. There's a price trade-off in every quest, and it's
Of course.
not so they can learn to make money. That's helpful because most of them do, but it's really so you can learn how to value trade-offs, how to
Mhm.
compare different trade-offs and make those trade-offs. You mentioned bureaucracy. It was interesting this year. Our Launchpad, our high school group, had this highly developed, almost Tocquevillian society, because they had all these rules and systems, and it worked pretty well, but it was kind of cumbersome. And they decided this year that was too bureaucratic, and they wiped out all the rules except for 3. And I think it was like, don't hit each other in the head. There were 3 rules like that.
Mm-hmm.
What they decided, though, is they would not add back any rule that didn't apply or didn't help as a consequence more than half the studio. Instead, they would ask the people that needed the rule, why do you not want to be here? Because not to do, whatever that, we're not going to pass a rule to get James from tapping his pencil all day to annoy people. We're going to ask James, what's going on with you? And so what's fascinating is often getting rid of the bureaucracy, involves getting the right people on the bus with the right spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And the more rules you try to pass to fix the bureaucracy, the more bureaucratic it gets. And so it was fascinating. That came from the group. It didn't come from an adult. That was their genius of, this has become too cumbersome. We're going to strip it down. I'm sure it'll build back up, right? And then you strip it down again. But they're learning how to do that. They're the ones that will go out and fix the bureaucratic problem because they'll find a way to strip it back down.
That's really fascinating, and it also gives me a lot of encouragement and positivity for the future, because of kids like this who are learning so much in the way of, not just social skills, but just learning so much about how life really works that so many adults absolutely lack. I
know we're about out of time, so I want to end with one story, because there's one story that kind of brings all this together that I saw. So we bring in these new Acton owners from all around the world, and about 30 will come at a time for orientation. So they'll spend a day kind of listening to the young people and working with us and getting ready to launch their own Acton. Mm-hmm. And we had a young man, in fact, an owner from England. So we were going to open one in England. So this was the owner from England. Mm-hmm. And he had a background in education, which was unusual for our owners, but he was really a pretty well-known guy in that world. And we came around at the very end, and everyone got to say in one breath what their biggest lesson learned was, or what they were going to do. And this man, it came his time, and he said, I'll never forget it. He said, I have always considered myself an expert in tigers. He goes, it's like I was an expert in tigers as an educator. But he said, but I never realized till today I had been studying tigers in cages. And now I see what tigers are like when freed. And I understand what magnificent creatures they are. And that I know absolutely nothing about tigers at all. And I just thought that encapsulated our whole experience at Acton, is what magnificent, young people there are out there. If you free them up with freedom and responsibility, that they become something entirely different than we think about. And they do, James, provide hope for the future. And I think the hope of having 271 Actons around the world, and we're adding about 150 a year. So I think, and we're not the only answer. They'll spin off. People will have up with lots of different flavors of this. Mm-hmm. But the idea that young people are magnificent tigers that should be free with responsibility, I think, is the hope for the future.
Absolutely. That's really the driving force, that if you don't have that mentality, then you probably should reevaluate what your perception is, because it probably impacts more than just your perception of children. It's probably also impacting your perception of other people in general.
I agree. No, I think if I'd known what I knew now, I would have built Google instead of just the companies I built. I've learned so much from these young people about what it's like to believe and hold your peers accountable. It's very powerful.
Absolutely. Well, if somebody does want to follow you, I know that y'all are pretty active on social media. You got a great website that has a lot of information. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to actonacademy.org is one place. The other thing I'd encourage people to do, and I brought a copy, Laura's Courage to Grow book. This, my wife wrote this. It's a very fun read. I think it's 99 cents on Amazon. So we're basically trying to people read, but it's a beautiful story of what the hero's journey is. And even if you care nothing about Acton, to read it for your own child, right? And to read it for your own journey, it really is the story of how all this happened. And I think there are lessons and tools for any educator, any coach, any believer in young people, and even for us as parents, of how to think about it. So it's a beautiful read. So I'd either go to actonacademy.org or pick up Courage to Grow, and give it a good read.
Excellent. We'll make sure to plug that in the show notes as well,
Right.
and link to it. So, Jeff, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. It's a pleasure chatting with you again,
Thanks,
and
James.
congratulations on all the growth and success that your academic model has created around the world. It's inspiring to hear about it.
Thank you, James. Great to be with you.
All right. Tell Laura I said hello.
I will.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. The title sponsor for Thriveonomics is Thrive Mortgage. Licensed in multiple states across the U.S., Thrive Mortgage employs the best professionals, equipped with leading technology and the most efficient process to deliver a legendary lending experience. For more information about how we can serve you, or to find a local Thrive Mortgage professional in your area, please visit us at thrivemortgage.com. You can also contact us directly via email at thriveonomics@thrivemortgage.com. Thrive Mortgage is an equal housing lender, NMLS ID 268552.